بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. Last weeks we talked about different moral theories as the answers to the question of moral, the criterion or the source of moral rightness or wrongness or goodness and badness. So we discussed maybe three prominent approach: virtue ethics, which consider virtue as the cornerstone of moral life. Without virtue, there is no possibility for moral life or for good life, which ascribe to Aristotle and Aristotelian tradition. And then some of the Christian or Muslim scholars follow the same structure or way of thinking. And the second type of moral theories we discussed called deontological theories, divine command ethics or Kantian ethics. According to this theory, the cornerstone of ethics is duty, and without duty there is no responsibility, moral responsibility or moral goodness or badness or moral life. So according to deontology, the good moral life or a good life is just respecting the duty and doing something for the sake of duty, not other things. So the third type, which we discussed, called utilitarianism. According to this theory, utility is important in moral life. So maximizing the utility or the benefits of the people is the cornerstone of ethical life. And we also talked about some general figures or aspects of Islamic ethics and concluded that the main criterion for good life according to Islamic ethics is becoming near or the nearness to God. But nearness to God is a concept including itself also virtue, duty, and utility. But the top or the main point of Islamic ethics is just love of God or becoming near to God or imitating to God, and other words we have in our religious traditions. But today I'm talking of some moral theories. We cannot include them among moral theories because we have some worries about these theories, and sometimes we think that they are not moral theories, they are against morality. So I am talking about two of these sorts of moral theories. I call them moral theories according to the custom in modern time, because in modern time they are called moral theories, but many of scholars reject these theories and they think that they are not moral theories, they are against morality or against moral life. So they are threats to moral life, not supportive to moral life, but they called moral theories. Two of them are very famous. One is relativism, moral relativism, or cultural relativism, the same word, because the famous and prominent form of moral relativism is called cultural relativism. But we have also and other sorts or other kinds of moral relativism, but the famous and the very important kind of moral relativism actually is called cultural relativism. I'm talking soon about these moral theories. And the second is egoism. So this day I'm talking about two ethical theory. They are called ethical theory, but some of scholars, many of scholars have some worries about this naming or this term, because they think that they are not morality, because they are against morality. I just today talking about these issues. So at first, I talk about moral relativism and then moral egoism. So, you know, if we want to go in detail and to depths of the issue, we have not time to see all aspects of the issue. I just try to give an outline of the idea without going further, but I try to you know, be accurate in this report and in rejection of these theories without going in depth to the detail of these theories or to question and answer about these theories, which are you know, recently very hot. So I also maybe in one of my lectures refer to the very good book of Schaefer-Landau. The name of the book is Living Ethics, published maybe recently 2 or 3 years ago. I, in this lecture, use some of his articulations of these points that I'm going to explain. So Schaefer-Landau, in his book Living Ethics, discusses relativism, moral relativism, and egoism as skeptical worries about moral. So he thinks that these are not moral theories, although they're called moral theories, but they, you know, are sort of a skeptical approach to morality, because according to these theories, moral relativism or egoism, we have not real morality. So he has some worries about these theories. The name of the chapter, he discusses these theories, relativism or egoism or error theory. I'm not talking about error theory today. So the chapter's name is Skeptical Worries About Morality. So he think that these are a sort of a skepticism about morality, not giving an explanation of morality according to Schaefer. But I go further and I think that their destructive role in human moral life, I mean that the relativism or egoism destructive role in human moral life is much more than doubt about morality. And the prevalence of relativism and egoism among human beings destroys the essence of morality. So I just will explain the claim soon. But before going to discussion of moral relativism and moral egoism, I refer to one of the problems we encounter in modern times. Some call this problem or this issue as reductionism, the problem of reductionism. But I just want to, you know, refer, not go to discuss it in detail. The problem is this. Sometimes you see that the people or some of the scholars talking about religion or talking about God or talking about faith or talking about morality, but they interpret morality or religion as such that negate the essence of religion or negate the essence of morality. For example, you see some, I think this is the name of a journal in maybe in England, I'm not sure in which country of Europe, but I remember the name of the journal, Religion Without God. So they accept religion, but without God. So is this religion really? Or just, you know, misusing the name? So they use the name of religion, but they say that there is no God. I remember one book of Don Cupid, maybe published more than 10 years ago, with the name of The Sea of Faith. The Sea of Faith is the name of book of Don Cupid, one of atheists in England and UK. So he said that at the first pages of the book says that now we know that there is no God, but we need to keep faith. So the sea of faith, but without God. So this is a sort of irony or a problem we encounter in this time and the modern time. So this applied and currently is prominent in the case of morality also. Morality, according to our traditional or deep understanding, is a sort of self-purification, is a sort of controlling our desires and a sort of altruistic behavior. When you asked about the name of the, to name the one of the heroes of moral life, so you refer, for example, to Mother Teresa. Why? Because she had very cases of altruism. So altruism is the essence of morality, but egoism rejects it and say that moral life is just selfish endowment in trying to find the benefits of yourself. This is the morality according to egoism, for example. So egoism is named ethical theory, but it is rejecting the essence of ethics. Or relativism, for example. So this is the irony. The irony is that relativism and egoism themselves are considered moral theories. That is, according to them, people are supposed to organize their moral life. The main problem in this new age, in the modern time, is that sometimes there are interpretation of things like religion and morality that are contrary to their original spirit. For example, there is talk of religion without God, or morality without altruism, or self-purification. Our understanding of morality always include a sort of controlling the desire or self-purification or altruistic behavior. But some of these approaches, such as relativism or maybe egoism and error theory or other theories with the name of moral theory, but without having the spirit of morality. So this is the problem. So this is the point of Schaefer Rando in his book, Speak Skeptical Worries. But as I said, that I need to go further and say that the destruction of morality, not just skepticism about morality. So this is the introduction to the issue. So as I earlier said, that I am talking of two moral theories, or the name of moral theories, but without having a spirit of moral theories. So one of them is moral relativism. So there are many kinds of relativism, moral relativism, because also we have another forms of different forms of relativism. For example, epistemic relativism or metaphysical relativism. I'm not talking about relativism here, but I'm just talking about moral relativism, but not all kinds of moral relativism, because we also have different kinds of moral relativism. I'll just concentrate on one form of relativism, which is very famous and very important in modern times. So it is called cultural relativism. Cultural relativism is a sort of normative relativism. Normative relativism means that the theory accepts that the norm of moral life, or the source of moral life, is different from a society to another society. It is relative to each society. It is not absolute. So this is cultural relativism. So I'm just talking about moral relativism, and only one form of moral relativism which is famous, which is important, and which is prominent in modern time, is cultural relativism. So cultural relativism says that an act is morally acceptable just because it is allowed by a society, by the society in which it is performed, and immoral just because it is forbidden by it. So the important issue in cultural relativism is not the reality of moral properties or the essence of moral properties, because moral property has not essence. It is invented by a society. You know, it is became acted or became accepted in a society, in the society. So out of this society, there is no source of morality for the members of this society. So in each society, the members of society must rely on the society they are living in it. So this is cultural relativism, says that an act is morally acceptable. So contrary to, for example, intuitionism or other forms of moral realism, which accept the reality of moral property and doesn't take morality dependent of the choice of a society. So according to cultural relativism, each society has its own norms, and it is obligatory or duty for the members of that society to respect these forms, these of norms and these obligations or these demands. So morality is dependent on a society, on the society, on society, not on the reality out of the society. It's not an absolute essential attribution of, for example, truth or for truthfulness or lying. There is no essence for lying or essence for truthfulness to be regarded as good or bad out of a society, out of the society, absolutely. So this is the main point. Cultural relativism says that an act is morally acceptable just because it is allowed by the society in which it performed, and immoral just because it is forbidden by it. This theory has some attractions. So why people widely accept this form of moral theory? I use the term moral theory, but I'm not, believing in it, that this theory considered as moral theory, but because usually it is considered moral theory, I just refer to it as moral theory. So this theory has some attractions. Because of these attractions, people believe or tend to believe in this theory. On this view, morality is made by and for human beings, so that every society makes its own morality during its history. Because, if you accept that morality is something, established in before you're coming to life and becoming a member of a society, so it is pre-established by God, for example, or by nature. This is a sort of, determination of human will. Some people consider this as a, assault to human being. So they think that morality is a sort of thing that is invented by a society for the good life in the society. So it is not something like, for example, other real properties pre-established before our, membership in the societies. So this is one of the attractions. This theory. So on this view, morality is made by and for human beings, so that every society makes its own morality during its history. There is nothing mystery. Another attraction is this. One of the problems moral realism encounter, or defenders of moral realism encounter, is this. Because if you say that, for example, redness, the color, or yellow or red, is something real, it is easy to explain that this is something not depend on my choice or not depend on my will. It is a reality. In the reality, we can perceive it. It is different. Redness is different from yellow. But if you come to explain the reality of goodness or badness, for example, you say that in this case, telling truth is good. But in this case, Also, telling truth is bad in another case because it maybe lead to killing one innocent person. So in telling truth, in some cases good, in some cases bad. So how you can be able to explain that there is a real difference between this case and this case? The reality of telling truth is the same. So it is very difficult to explain the the reality of moral properties. But there is nothing mysterious thing about morality in relativism. Morality is a code that reflects cultural taste, nothing more or less. This is very simple idea of morality. Morality is a taste of a society, cultural taste. So the taste of this society differs from the taste of other society, another society. So if you are living in, for example, in America or USA, you must follow, or you must regard the norms of that society. This is all of the point of the morality. But if you leave the that society and, for example, come to live in a religious society of, for example, Najaf or Qom, for example. So there are many other norms in that society. You must regard, you must accept, you must follow this. This is the morality. So there is no real basis for morality. All things depend on the taste of this culture. So this is cultural relativism. This is also is an attraction for some people to make them accept this theory as a moral theory, because it is very comfortable for them that they hold that there is no binding, or there is no real obligation make me limited in each society. No, it is only my choice. If accept this society, I follow this, and if not, leave this society and go to another taste and cultural taste, and so follow that. So this is the issue. One of the attractions of another attractions of moral relativism. Also, there is another attraction of moral relativism, because we have the problem of moral knowledge. For example, virtue ethics, very difficult procedure of finding which action is good, which action is bad according to virtue ethics. We must regard that this action come out of virtue or not, and this is not so easy to find that this action is out of virtue or vice. This is not so easy. Or according to, for example, utilitarianism, we need to calculate different things. That is it a way to maximize the utility or not? So difficult. But moral knowledge in cultural relativism is very easy to find, because just you refer to the preferences of this society and you can find the moral knowledge. So one of the attractions of moral relativism is that moral knowledge is easily learned. It is enough to know what the community wants or does not want from you. That is all that's needed to know right from wrong. This is very easy way. And so, usually people prefer a theory which is easy, or which has, not so much bending or so much restriction for them. So this is a very good candidate for them to keep the name of morality. They say that we are living morally because we follow this tradition. We follow, for example, the tradition of our country or our culture. And so we are living morally. But morality, according to moral relativism, has not so much demand for the people. So another attraction, according to relativism, we are unable to judge one culture's moral code as morally superior or inferior to another's. This has seemed to many like a refreshing kind of equality in the moral sphere. Because one of the very important attraction for the defender or follower of moral relativism is this, because they say that if you are not follower or supportive of moral relativism or cultural relativism, so always you have this idea that this culture, for example, this culture's code of morality is superior to that culture or inferior to that culture. You just always compare this to another society, and this may lead you to hate this society and love another society. This is against egalitarianism, which is a very approvable, praised by many people. So but moral relativism give this chance to you that take all cultures moral code as equivalent and not this culture's moral code superior to another's or inferior to another's. Yes, you say that, for example, the knowledge, physical knowledge of this society is better than that society, but you cannot write to say that this society has a good position, moral position, rather than that one, because there is no way to compare this. Because if you try to compare this code or morality of this society to another society, you need to have a criterion out of this society and that society, and that return the issue to moral realism. So it is rejected by moral relativism or cultural relativism. So another attraction, according to relativism, is this: we are unable to judge one culture's moral code as morally superior or inferior to another's. And this has seemed to many like a refreshing kind of equality in the moral sphere. Finally, many this is one of the important attractions. Some defender of moral relativism rely on this point. They say that this is the point, many embraces relativism because they believe that it offers strong support for a policy of toleration. Because they say that if you judge that this society has a good moral position than to other societies, so you may hate this society, and this may lead you to a sort of intolerance with respect to this society. Tolerance is come from thinking equally about all cultures or about all societies. So the egalitarianism or equal conception or equal respect to all societies, which is the content of moral relativism, is the source for toleration. So this is one of the supportive idea or reasons for defenders of moral relativism. So I am to this point defend or explain the attractions, or these attractions can be articulated as a reason in defense of moral relativism. So I just summarize what I said to this point, that I'm talking about moral relativism, but a form of moral relativism which is common in modern time, which is called cultural relativism. I'm not talking about other forms of moral relativism, and just because we have meta-ethical relativism and different sorts of moral relativism. I'm just talking about normative relativism, which is called moral relativism, and about cultural relativism. I explained the idea of moral relativism, which take the source of normativity, moral value, or moral rightness and wrongness, the will of the society or the norms accepted by the society. So according to this idea, there is no moral real properties, or there is no essential properties, moral properties. So they reject these conceptions of morality, and they think that morality is something invented by a society. So it may be different from this society in comparing to another society, because of the history or of the traditions accepted in this society but not accepted in another society. I talked about some attractions can be articulated as a reason or argument in defense of moral relativism. But I come to refer to some defeaters or maybe points against moral relativism. As I earlier said, that I just give an outline of the idea of moral relativism and rejection of it without going in details. So one of the point I referred in the last phrase of the previous slide is that toleration is a very famous idea, and all of us know that it is very important in social life, because without toleration, without tolerance, so always there is a sort of violation or a sort of war or conflict between the societies. So toleration is a very good idea, we accept it. But the problem is this. Is it possible to take toleration as a supportive idea for moral relativism? I reject this. I'm not rejecting the importance of toleration. I'm not talking about importance of toleration. I accept toleration, but according to Islamic conception, it has some exceptions or some limitations. I'm not talking about the limitations or the issue of toleration. It is a separate issue. It must be considered or might be discussed in other place. But I'm talking about the relation of toleration to moral relativism, to cultural relativism. The question is this: is it possible to give toleration as a supportive, idea for moral relativism, for cultural relativism? This is something I rejected, or many scholars rejected. I just report the rejection of this in moral literature. So defending relativism on the basis of the value of tolerance negates the essence of the moral relativism, because it means accepting the absolute value of toleration. This is one of the defeaters of this claim that toleration is supportive of cultural relativism. Why? Because according to cultural relativism, the moral value of everything, including toleration itself, must be come from the society. It is not possible that defend this idea by accepting the absolute value, moral value for toleration. If you take toleration as an argument for moral relativism, so you are giving this situation, this position to toleration. So you think that toleration is basically right, okay, absolutely okay. So you say that because this is good always, so for keeping this goodness of toleration or importance of toleration, we must accept cultural relativism. Is it okay? No. because this is the problem. Defending relativism on the basis of the value of tolerance negates the essence of the moral relativism, because it means, this argumentation means that you accept the absolute value of tolerance, while it is assumed that moral value of anything, including tolerance itself, depends on its acceptance in the society. This is the important issue. So toleration cannot be argument in support of moral theory such as moral relativism, because according to moral relativism, toleration value is dependent on the society. So it cannot be argument for the establishment of this theory. So this is the problem. The second problem we have with toleration is very important, because suppose that in a society, for example, Nazi society in Germany at the time of war. So this is a society, this is a country. So this society reject toleration with regard to other, generations in other countries. So he reject the value of toleration with the other generations. So we have a puzzle, because according to cultural relativism, this is the norm of this society. I'm living in Germany, for example, and that time. So I need to follow this idea because the society accepted it. Many people in the society, it is accepted as a norm of the society. So according to moral cultural relativism, I must follow this norm. So is it coherent with the idea of toleration? So how can we say that moral culturalism, cultural relativism is more in coherence with the idea of toleration? No. This is the problem we have in many of the societies, not in Nazi societies. If a culture deepest values support intolerance, and this is certainly the case for many cultures, perhaps most cultures, then for those in such society, being tolerant is immoral according to cultural relativism. So there is no conceptual or there is no logical relation between toleration and cultural relativism. So you cannot refer to a value of toleration to support the idea of cultural relativism. There is no logical relation. So you cannot infer from toleration or importance of toleration the importance of cultural relativism. These are two separated things, sometimes coincide without necessary connection. So this is the second issue we have with the moral or cultural relativism. But one of the other weaknesses of relativism is that this is very important. According to cultural relativism, the moral principle of any society are uncritical and always true. This is the content, or this is the claim of cultural relativism. So cultural relativism says, while you are living in this society, you have not right to challenge this society's code of ethics. So suppose that all of the norms in this society are true, uncritical. It's not possible to be criticized. This is the content of moral culture. If you are not satisfied with these norms, you must leave this society, you go to another society. So this is the idea of cultural relativism, but it is very dangerous because if a culture's, and because one of the weaknesses of relativism is that according to it, the moral principles of any society are uncritical and always true. While we know this is not the case, and how many there were and are societies based on slavery and false moral principles. So this is against our deepest conceptions of morality. We always try to improve the morality of our society. So how we can make coherence between the idea of cultural relativism and moral development in the society, or moral reformation in the society? So this is the problem. Such an attitude rejects the moral reform of a society and leaves no room for the moral growth of a society. Individuals in this society also grow up to the extent of following and imitating society, and not on the basis of reasoning, dialogue, and the moral study of other cultures. So it is not possible for me to know or to learn something moral principles or moral issue from your society, because it means that your society accepted as superior to me, which rejected by the idea of cultural relativism. So this is very important issue. Cultural relativism is not really moral idea, because it is against moral idea, because in morality always we assume that I can improve my personality, moral character, but according to by reasoning, by consciousness, not just by following the society's laws or the society's norms. So I have right to criticize our society, my society. So this is our conception of morality, but according to cultural relativism, with the name of morality, they are working against morality, the essence of morality, the spirit of morality. So this is something I referred as an introduction in this lecture. Another important point is that there is another issue which is important also. I just refer to it in B. Another important point is that a society is usually a combination of different cultures, and a single moral vice is not heard from it. So, for example, you are living in the American society or UK society or Iran society. So, in Iran, we have different cultures included in the main culture of Iran. So we have not, here just one voice to follow in our society, because in our society there are, for example, Christian people, Jewish people. They are living in the society, so they have their own cultures or their own voice, moral voice. So if I suppose to follow the society norm, which one is the original or has the originality or has the authority? So there is a different point here, because every society, for example, society of America, has many subcultures in it. So these subcultures conflict sometimes with each other. So it is not possible to hear just one voice from as the voice of American society's moral code or taste of culture of America, because different cultures are included in American main culture. So this is the problem we have with cultural relativism. Another important point is that a society is usually a combination of different cultures, and a single moral vice is not heard from it. In American society, for example, there are dozens of subcultures with different moral values. In this case, it is very difficult to accurately define the ethical reference of community. So to this point, I talked about moral relativism, and I need to discuss the second ethical theory, which has the name of morality, but is against the spirit of traditional conception of morality, our deepest conceptions of morality. This is moral egoism, called moral egoism. So if you go to the books discuss moral theories, always you find these theories considered or included among the moral theories and has their defenders and many, ideas articulated in support of moral egoism, for example, or cultural relativism. There are some famous scholars in the West, for example, supporting the idea of moral relativism. And they say that in general or totally, the defeats of moral relativism is less than, for example, the defeats of virtue ethics, for example, or divine command ethics. They are this is the claim of them. But we have no time to go in detail to reject all these, arguments. Or I just try to give the outline of the idea and outline of the rejections or the defeats, or the points against this idea. So I referred to cultural relativism and talked about it and explained it, and enumerated some attractions of this idea as supporting this idea or as argumentation for this claim. And also I referred to some critical points against it, and I conclude that cultural relativism cannot be considered as moral theory because it is against some main perceivings we have about morality, such as reformation or relation of morality with reason or reasoning or consciousness. And this all is cut in this theory, and so it cannot be accepted. So, but maybe some defenders have some answers to these problems, or again some rejectors have some ideas against this. But just as a general explanation, it is enough. And so I go to the second idea or second theory, which is called moral egoism. Moral egoism says that we have no basic obligation to others. The only Assalamu alaikum. So, have you my voice?
Yes, Aga, we can hear you.
Yeah. Sorry for distraction. I have some problem with internet here, so I hope that I can continue. Is okay?
Yes, Aga, everything.
Yeah,
good.
thank you. So I'm talking about moral egoism. So according to moral egoism, we have no basic obligation to others. The only moral duty we have is to ourselves. You are allowed to help others according to moral egoism. Sometimes you help others, but only if doing so is going to benefit you in the long run. So this is egoism, deliberative egoism. All sorts of egoism is not so much, egoistic in appearance. So some cases of moral egoism or egoistic behavior maybe appear as altruistic, but in the essence it is egoistic because it is based on a calculation of the benefits in long run, and so this is moral egoism. It is apparent, and so it is very famous claim. Egoism is against some basic ideas we have about morality, such as generosity, compassion, and benevolence. We always know morality as encouraging altruistic behavior and against selfishness or self-centeredness. Although this is the point, some scholars reject moral egoism as a moral theory totally, because they say that our conception of morality, related or complicated with our understanding of altruism. Because altruistic behavior is a paradigm of moral behavior. So how we can say that altruism is against morality because we accept moral egoism? So this is not acceptable for many. So we always know morality as encouraging altruistic behavior and against selfishness or self-centeredness. The moral heroes in our mind are those who sacrifice their lives for others, and instead of putting their own interests first, they pay attention to human interests in general and even prefer another to themselves. This perception of morality, which is deep in our consciousness, is in conflict with egoism. So egoism is an idea accepted by many of lay people and some of the scholars. They say that I have only duty to improve myself, and so to satisfy personal desires and to help myself, for example, to gain success or to gain moral, to gain situations or positions in the society, or to gain pleasures. This is the idea of moral egoism. So moral egoism say that this is okay. This is your duty. So it is talking about human duties. So according to moral egoism, the duty you have, moral duty you have, is only to maximize your pleasure. This is the moral egoism. So there are some scholars, some famous scholars. One of them is Ayn Rand in England, defending moral egoism, and his famous book is called, the name of his book is The Virtue of Selfishness, or The Virtue of Egoism. This is the virtue of selfishness. So he talk about the virtue of selfishness and have some give some arguments in support of the idea of moral egoism. So one of these arguments is called self-reliance argument in favor of egoism. I just follow the articulation of Schaefer-Lando, because he articulated Ayn Rand. Because in Ayn Rand's books, there is no explicit form of argument, but we can infer from his writings. So this is the articulation of Schaefer-Lando. Schaefer-Lando articulated Ayn Rand's influential argument in defense of egoism as follows, and called it the self-reliance argument. This is the premises of argument. The most effective, the first premise is this: the most effective way of making everyone, this is the argument, and the first premise is this: the most effective way of making everyone better off is for each person to mind his own business and tend only to his own needs. This is a claim, say that the best way in the society to make the life of everyone better is just to, you know, not intervene with his life or his work, and just to allow him to follow his desires, to follow his you know, interests, not you know, conflict with him, just allow him to follow his interests. This is the best way in total society to make everyone's life better off. So this is the one premises. The second premise is we ought to take the most effective path to making everyone better off. This is our duty to follow the way that it is a way for making everyone better off. This is the second premise, and therefore the conclusion is this: we each ought to mind our own business and tend only to our own needs. This is the moral egoism, because according to moral egoism, we have only, the claim is this: we only have a duty to ourselves, to follow our interests and not to help other person, except the help of the other person, you know, finally being in the interest of myself, for example, but without finding some pleasure or some, you know, benefit of the helping. So the helping is not obliged, or the saving the life of other people is not obliged. So this is the argument. If you don't, you know, interfere, don't conflict with a person, and give time, give chance, government give chance to each one to follow what he wants or what he prefers, and so without the help of the society, without the help of the other. So this is the best way in totality to make a society, for example, in a better off situation. So this is the argument. But the rejection of this argument, the first premise of the argument is wrong. It is apparently wrong, but how they accept these premises? Because if we assume that you are the one who needs any help, for example, a person is disabled, will it make your life better if I let you go and think for myself? Is this okay? For example, we have many children in the society, many disabled persons in the society. Is it okay just to give them to chance to follow their interests? They are not able, they have not ability to follow their interests. So they need the help of me. So they need the help of the other persons. If you let them, this is not good way to make their life better off. So this is the false premises. This claim that if you just let people to follow their minds, and so they not need your help, is this is not the good way for making their life better off. So this is the first premise. The second premise is also in conflict with the basic of moral egoism. So moral egoism saying that you as a moral agent, or you as a moral counselor, always do what is in your interest. So the second premise of this argument say that we ought to take the most effective path to making everyone better off. So this is not the duty accepted by moral egoism, because moral egoism says that you have not relation or obligation to making the life of the other person. So according to this second premise, we say that we ought to take the most effective path to making everyone better off. No, according to moral egoism, I have only obligation or duty to take the most effective path to making myself better off. So this is also false. The second premise is also in conflict with the basis of moral egoism. For moral egoists, the ultimate moral duty is to maximize personal benefit. There is no moral requirement to make everyone better off. So in contrast to this argument, so we can conclude everyone would be better off if people help others to some extent. Yes, you know, in some cases, for example, helping others has no good result because sometimes they make them, you know, always rely on your support, and they are not thinking about their destiny or about their you know, life, and so they always became dependent on you. This is this is the problem of helping other person in some cases, but this is not the defeater of the principle of help or you know, caring of the others. So the care or the help is very important, but in some cases we need to have good sort of helping or good sort of curing, because some cases of curing or some cases of helping other people is against their autonomy, against their independence. So this is not the problem of the essence of helping or essence of you know, generosity and others. So we can conclude this argument is not okay, but has some defenders. So they say that if you know, leave everyone follow their way, in some cases they have some failures or some, you know, in success, but finally and in totally, this is the good way for, you know, making the life of people better off. So we have two problems with this idea. One is this premises is not okay because the best way is giving or advising or, you know, prescribing the people to help others people, but with a good form of helping. And this is a better way to make the life of people good. The second is that this idea that I have duty to take a way or take a path to make the life of people better off is not egoistic, and it is against egoism. So this cannot be accepted as a premise in the. But the most famous argument in favor of egoism is this, called psychological egoism. I need to explain more because this is the famous and this is the most effective argument for in support of moral egoism. At first, we need to distinguish between psychological egoism and moral egoism. What is the difference? The difference is the same as difference between psychology and morality. What is the difference between psychology and morality? Psychology is a science. It doesn't relate or talking about the norms. It doesn't talking about the goodness or badness. It it's explaining of the you know, procedures of our behavior, for example, our emotion or our mentality. This is the science. Science is a factual thing, just talking about the facts, not talking about the goodness or badness of the facts. So this is the psychology. So psychological egoism is the claim. Some of the psychologists, maybe most of the psychologists, accept this idea. They say that as a psychologist, they are talking, not as a moral theory or morality. They are not talking about this goodness or badness of this behavior or of this procedure, but they are, according to their, for example, studies, research, they say that we come to this conclusion according to the psychological egoist. They say that we consider the procedure of motivation in human mind, in human soul. We see that always every person act or became motivated only with respect to the, gaining something for himself, for herself, not for others. So this is psychology. Psychology says us that you think, for example, this is good thing, this is pleasant, so you can follow this and you can, try to gain this because this is your pleasure, not the other's pleasure. So others' pleasure cannot motivate you. Others' benefit cannot motivate you, according to these psychologists. We are not, satisfied with this idea. I talked about, I will talk about it, but I just explained the idea. So this is psychological egoism. But what is moral egoism? Moral egoism is not about the factual explanation of the motivation or the procedure of motivation in our selves or in the soul. It is talking about goodness or badness. So it is a prescription. So according to moral egoism, this is a prescription to follow our interests, to prescribe everyone just to follow his interests, not the interest of others. It is good to follow his interests. This is the idea of moral. So it is a normative statement, but psychological egoism, it is a factual statement. So, but there is a relation between psychological egoism and moral egoism, because if you accept psychological egoism and as a psychologist, so how you can, for example, be altruistic, moral altruistic? If you accept moral psychological egoism, the only possibility for you to accept moral egoism, because there is no other possibility. Because if this is the reality of motivation in ourselves, so how you can prescribe somebody to have altruistic behavior? Because it is impossible for him according to this idea. So this is the relation between psychological egoism and moral egoism. So many defenders of moral egoism rely on the idea of psychological egoism. They took from psychologists. So this is the problem. If psychological egoism is true, then we cannot be altruistic. This is apparent. This is a true premise. If we can't be altruist, then it can't be our duty to be altruist. So if it is not possible for me, taklif ma la yutaq in Arabic, in Islamic theology, they say that taklif ma la yutaq muhal. It means that it is impossible, for example, to, command a person, that it is not possible for him to do. So what you command or you prescribe that you must do this, it is not possible for you. There is no possibility for a man, according to psychological egoists, to have altruistic, but you are asking him to behave altruistic. This is the problem. If we cannot be altruistic, then it can't be our duty to be altruistic. This is also a apparent premise. Therefore, if psychological egoism is true, then it can't be our duty to be altruistic. This is also a very apparent idea. So these three premises of the argument is all true. So what is the problem with this argument? This is the problem. Psychological egoism is true. Therefore, it can't be our duty to be altruistic. The problem we have with this argument is related to the fourth premise. We are not accepting psychological egoism is true. We reject psychological egoism. but on the basis of what point you reject. I just refer to some forms of rejection of the idea of psychological egoism. There are some psychologists, for example, recently they became more, interested in this approach. They reject by the science of psychology, psychological egoism. They found some altruistic motivation in human mind by experience. So they follow the science of psychology, experimental science of psychology, but they have found some cases of psychological altruism in human mind, in human soul. So they reject the idea of psychological egoism. The idea of psychological egoism say that it is impossible to behave altruistic, because always, the procedure of motivation always relate to the interest, personal interest. So this is some of the psychologists, I not remember the name of the psychologists who reject the idea of psychological egoism. And I'm not sure about the name, so sorry. Also, some philosophers, for example, Tom Nagel or other persons, by the way of philosophy, reject the idea of psychological egoism. So we have rejection in psychology and also in philosophy. They are talking about the possibility of altruism. The name of his paper or the name of his book is the possibility of altruism. So they say that in human life, it is not the case that all of the behaviors of the human mind or of human individual always is egoistic. They reject psychologically and also by experiment some cases of human behavior, and also by philosophical argumentation. But I'm not here in a good time. I have no time to talk about these rejections, but I just refer to some intuitive idea all of us have in our mind. We have many cases of altruism in the lives of people. For example, mother, ready to take the life of, for example, his son or his daughter at the expense of, for example, dying. So this is a case of altruistic behavior, or many cases in the saints. We see source of, we cannot say that all of these, yes, in some cases, altruism is a just surface, but the depth is egoism. I accept this. Yes, in some cases, we accept that in some cases, altruism is a way to, gain more and more personal money or personal interests. So this is okay, but it is not acceptable in all cases of altruistic behavior we see in the society. We cannot, say that all is just a way for egoism, because it depends on a prejudice. If you have an idea of impossibility of altruism, you can say that because I believe in impossibility of altruism, all these forms of apparent altruism really and in depth are egoistic. But if you have not this prejudice, so you cannot say that all of these cases or instances of altruism is just apparent or just surface, and the depth is egoism. So also the result is not explicitly proving, yes, because in the result we came is this. Therefore, it cannot be our duty to be altruistic. Some person may say that this is not egoism, because egoism is having the duty to oneself. But we can, combine another thing and say that although the result is not explicitly proving moral egoism, but by denying the possibility of altruism and assuming that we have some moral duties, then they all become accustomed to securing the self-interest. And this is what egoism says. So as I referred, the first three premises of the argument is true, but the fourth premise, which says that psychological egoism is the case that all people psychologically act solely on their own self-interest, and that there is no possibility of helping others without expectation of self-interest, is false. Also, some cases of self-sacrifice are actually based on personal profit and loss calculation. It is highly doubtful that this is the case in all of these actions. So there is a point we need to say in the last part of the lecture. So an important explanation is needed about moral egoism, because it is sometimes said that even Aristotle ethics in particular, and eudaimonism in general, which is, more broad than Aristotelian ethics, are egoistic because they consider the well-being of the agent as the center of morality. Some person come and accuse Aristotle or virtue ethics also of being a sort of egoism, because according to virtue ethics, what is important is the well-being of the agent. So well-being of the agent is the source of, considering or enumerating something as virtue or something as vice. So this is the egoism, because he just try to keep your happiness, not the happiness of other people. So this is egoism, for example, accusation of egoism. So, but also even religious ethics, which consider the ultimate goal of moral life to be the attainment of eternal happiness or nearness to God, are still accused of being egoist, although they are being accused of egoism, because they say that what is important, for example, in religious ethics, in Islamic ethics, for example, what is important for everyone, for each person, to follow the attainment of his happiness, to struggle or to try to find nearness to God, nearness of himself, not nearness for you. This is egoism, for example. This is accusation of egoism about virtue ethics, or maybe also in religious ethics. But because all moral duties of a person are focused on providing a good life in the hereafter and divine closeness for that person himself, this is the accusation. But this is a fundamental mistake, because what we see in Aristotle ethics, and especially in religious ethics, is that each individual is in fact obliged to realize his nature and to make proper use of his human abilities. But an important part of these capacities and human nature is basically focused on the other and is realized through helping the other. So what is the difference between egoism and virtue ethics? In virtue ethics, what is important is to self-realization, realization of the capacities of humanity, human capacities, not animal capacities. But one of the capacities we have as a human is helping the other, is caring the others. So this is altruism, not egoism. So caring the others is included or in our attainment of happiness. The attainment of happiness means self-realization, means actualization of our capacities. But one of the capacities we have is caring the other, is, according to Imam Ali, for example, Allah Allah fil aitam, la tughibbu afwahahum fayazi'u bi hazratikum, for example. This is not, egoism. If you want to become near to God, you must care item those their parents are dead, for example. This is not a sort of egoism. You must pay attention. You must spend money. You must, invest your money in favor of the life of these persons, because this is the way for becoming near to God. So this is the answer, but this is a fundamental mistake, because what we see in Aristotle ethics, and especially in religious ethics, is that each individual is in fact obliged to realize his nature and to make proper use of his human abilities. But an important part of these capacities and human nature is basically focused on the other and is realized through helping the other. In Islamic ethics, the best state of morality is to think of his own perfection and to strive for it through other-oriented behaviors that are rooted in his divine nature. In fact, in Islamic ethics, ego includes the other within one's own essence, and the border between egoism and altruism is blurred. This is the answer we can, if you need more explanation, so can continue, but I think the idea is apparent. The final slide or the final point is this. There is a narration of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him. We can find this in Islamic hadiths that the Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him, slaughtered a sheep to give its meat to the poor. This is Zeb al-Qurban, is famous, work in Islamic worships. He took some of that meat home to use. So he took some special and very little part of. His wife said in a protesting tone, "You would give this little to others." He protests and say that as an irony, that you give it and take it and give also this little piece to the other person. Didn't you keep something usable for yourself? So he protests, she protests. But the Prophet said, this is the point, I happen to keep them all. I happen to keep them all. Really, I keep all of the meat I gave to the poor. This is useful for me. This is the my part. So this is the answer. This is the narration. I happen to keep them all, except for a little. This little piece. I took it and brought it into my home. This all is what left. All the forgiveness I gave to the meat to the poor, they remain, they are for me. So this is a sort of combining the others or the altruistic behavior as an egoistic behavior. This is a very good narration, and in this view, helping the other is more in favor of the agent than satisfying his personal desires. So this is the last point, and thank you for your attention, and I give some answer to the question. So I would disagree that eudaimonia is a type of egoism. Yes, I also disagree. Eudaimonia is similar to nafs al-mutmayyaz. So it would be illogical to argue that it's egoism. Otherwise, anything would be egoism. It's rather altruism. Yes, I just explain your idea. You are correct, because I also say that virtue ethics or Islamic ethics is egoism because it is, it make ego so embracing, or so it gives so extension to the ego, which include the altruism or the others, and regarded the others as a part of your ego. So if you care, for example, for a poor man, this is not something against your ego, according to Islam. This also is a part of your ego. We have two sorts of desires. Desire to satisfy, to find pleasure for myself, but also desire to make the other people to have pleasure. This is also is a sort of my abilities, a sort of myself. This is also is my ego. So Shahid Mutahari say that we have two sort of ego. Man elvi, man sefli. He says that we have an inferior ego and superior ego. So superior ego is the main or the moral part of our ego. Superior ego is desiring something for the benefit of others, just for the benefit, not without, not by considering the result of that benefit for myself. No, just giving money to help the other person without any expectation. So this is what is the difference between individualism and egoism? Yes, individualism, very good question. Individualism is the philosophical frame for egoism. Egoism is a sort of moral theory, but individualism is not limited to the morality. It is a more extensive idea, but it pay the way, prove the prepare the way for egoism. So egoism based on individualism. Individualism has some other conceptions or some other aspects more than egoism. For moral objectivity, also is Islam for moral objectivity or relativism? No, certainly Islamic is moral objectivism, not relativism, because according to Islamic conception, for example, justice is so objective that God also, when want to command us to do something, respect it. So justice is more fundamental than the divine command. Is the base of divine command. So this is objectivism. It's not possible to be relativism. It doesn't relate to the society, the want of society, or the approval of a society. So this is objectivism, certainly. Yes, but we need to, explain that, for example, what is the difference between, because you have different sorts of objectivism or moral realism. So in some cases in modern moral some modern meta-ethics, so they have talking of some sort of objectivism, for example, as supervening on some material things. But there's the difference between, basically, yes, it is objectivism. So yes, would you not review some Islamic law? Not would we not review some Islamic law? So this is also a very good question. I can give you an analogy because, for example, you are talking about human health in physiology, for example, in medical sciences. You are talking of human health. This is not, relative. This is you're talking about the absolute conception of health. But when you come to give the treatment for this person to find happiness, for that person to find happiness, you sometimes need to consider, a special situation of this person and that person. So you consider in your treatment, not in your study of health. The study of health is general, is absolute. But in your treatment, you need some consideration, maybe difference treatment for this person and that person, for giving to, for example, or different drug for this and for that person, but both on the basis of finding healthy. Healthy is absolute conception in medicine. When we come to, for example, Islamic law also has some analogy with medicine or with this idea. In Islamic law, for example, it is important to make justice in the society. You see that, or you use fuqaha or the jurisprudence sometimes find that, for example, giving the authority in divorce between, for example, 2% to the hand of a man is more near to justice, or is by default, for example, in a society is justice. But in some cases, this is against justice. So they differ in these cases. They say that in these cases it is against justice. So they have some worry about the legality of, for example, this case. So the idea is this. My answer is this. I say that the principle or the main or the cornerstone or the main trend or main part of the Islamic law is absolute, and so for everyone, for every person. But in some cases, we come near to giving treatment or to giving a special prescription for this or for that. In these cases, we have some relativism, but this is not called moral relativism. This is relative to the context. This is not against absolutism. So I'm not sure that I could give a good answer or not, but the idea is this: since we have some main part of Islamic law or Islamic ethics generally accepted and absolute, but when we come to give some advice or some prescription to some persons, according to the context, we have some variations. Otherwise, Kant categorical imperative would disagree with the concept of killing, even if killing was justified, such as self-defense. Otherwise, Kant's categorical. Yes, this is okay. Even in the case of self-defense, according to Kant, killing other person is bad, or telling or lying is bad. This is bad, according to Kant. This is absolutely bad, morally bad. But but what you decide in this case, you are doing bad thing, but because of having other duty, there is a conflict. So the conflict doesn't, remove the badness of killing other person. The conflict gives you the chance to calculate between two conflicting idea of killing other person or saving your life, and so you come to the, for example, a conclusion that it is better to do this rather than this, because the harm of this is less, and the benefit of this, for example, is this is not Kantian, idea that we give expectation, we give some, cases of, we accept some cases of, for example, killing is good. This is not Kantian idea. Yes, you are right. So sorry for some. This is, I think this is, we have one lecture more, and so next week, inshallah, we are talking about some other threats to moral life in the modern ages. So unfortunately, the prevalence of egoism or relativism make, moral life very difficult or very confusion, and so different people think that they are living morally, but in the reality they are living against morality. So unfortunately, they think that because by just relying on the name, they say that we are living morally because we accepted egoism. This is not moral life, and this is against moral life. If we look at the dua in months of Ramadan, it asks for example, Allah. Allahum agni, yes. Allah, can we see this teaching us to describe the desire goodness for all, not only for oneself, and the process fulfilling? Yes, you're right. In many du'as or in many narrations, always, for example, Imam Ali also said that the Prophet prescribes us to respect our neighbors to the extent that we think that neighbors are such as our sons or our daughters, and they have some part of, for example, our buildings or money. So this is the idea of Islamic, as I told, in this, according to Islamic ethics, preferring the other is more in your benefit than just following your benefits. So this is the idea. So if you have not question, I can finish, and I'm not sure. Is it okay to finish this session?
Yes, Agajan. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, inshallah. Next week, we see you again.
Yeah,
okay?
Next week is our last session, inshallah.
Yeah, last session, inshallah. Thank you very much for your attention.